I don't think I'll make it through the campaign because I never get to eat. They don't believe in feeding their candidates for president. I believe in the equal opportunity of every man and every woman to have a lunch, even if we have to pay for it. Which of these mics is live? Paul, the one on the left? I'm going to choose the one on the right. Listen, I'm delighted to be here. I want to thank Paul Godola for his longtime friendship, not just for Jack Kemp, but for the president, for the ideas around which that Detroit platform was written in 1980, and for his leadership on behalf of the president and more recently on behalf of the Kemp coalition. And I'm delighted, Paul, to have you introduce me. Thank you very much. Delighted to be in Romulus. I want to thank Lola Peterson for being here. We're going to have a chance later on today to announce our co-chairs of the Michigan campaign, and I'm sure I'll get questioned about that position. But Lola, thank you for your friendship and support. And Mike Legg, where are you? Thank you, Mike, for all the effort that you've put into this campaign. Don Wolf, 18th District Kemp Chair. Jerry Wall, where's Jerry? Hold your hand up, Jerry. Thanks again for all that you've done for us. Clark Durant, of course, the mild, shy, retiring Director of Legal Services. But Clark took his whole family to Iowa, and I saw about 15 clippings of the Durant children walking the streets of tiny little Iowa towns, gathering votes and delegates for Kemp. Yeah. But Clark, I appreciate. Randy Agley's here. Randy, thank you. Dr. Keith Butler, who's been just a stalwart in the cause. Andy, good to see you. Andy Anusis, appreciate your friendship. Heads up the Lithuanians for Kemp campaign. We have Estonia. Now, since I came out for a full press on Gorby, Mikhail Gorbachev, General Secretary Gorbachev, at the rally Sunday for human rights in Washington, for freedom for Jews, Christians, Lithuanians, Estonians, Romanians, Bulgarians, Ukrainians, Georgians, Latvians. The support from Eastern and Central Europe is spreading all over the country. But Andy, thank you for your friendship and for being here. Let me just say what a pleasure it is to, I was going to say, have lunch with you. To watch you eat. I appreciate so very much the commitment to principle in this room. Somehow this whole process gets personalized, and I must say, as somebody who has tried to depersonalize politics in his career, I think it is important that we emphasize ideas, issues, policies, principles, platforms, people, what kind of a party we want. Mackinac Island, I tried, many of you were there, I tried to speak about our party being a Lincoln party, a party of people, a party that wants that tent broad enough for everybody to be under. And I must say, just at the outset, I would hope, and I want to pledge to you in this room and anybody who might be watching or listening or reading remarks from this event, I really believe that the disagreements are temporary, that the unity of a party does not require unanimity. We don't all have to march in lockstep with each other. We are, out of many people, one. That's a sign of strength, not weakness. And I want to assure you, the real bridge between the Republicans in Michigan and the Republicans between Michigan and Iowa, and between Iowa and New Hampshire, and between the primary and the general is going to be the Kemp campaign. And we'll run a campaign based upon the idea that we're going to put ideas first, we're going to put winning second only to advancing the cause of progressive conservative ideas and ideals. And let me just say to you once again, there is no one in our party that has done more to reach out to more groups of voters in this country than Jack Kemp. And I want to run that type of a campaign. I pledged to you in Michigan that my campaign will be designed to heal those temporary frictions, if you will. I'm not interested in dividing people. I'm interested in uniting people. And I want to assure you that those of you who are sticking with our coalition predicated on principle and philosophy and our platform from 80 and 84 and what it's going to be like in 88. Let me tell you very briefly, and before I open it up for questions. I want a platform in 88 that takes the great work that was done in 1980 that started the revolution right in Detroit. I was very proud that Bill Brock picked Detroit for our Republican convention because it signaled a northeastern Great Lakes industrial state like Michigan and signaled all those other industrial states from the Midwest to the Northeast. It was a strong signal to blacks, to working men and women, to ethnic Americans, to Catholic, Jew, to evangelical Christian. I think that Detroit platform and picking it for Detroit was an absolute essential ingredient in making the Republican begin the process by which we could broaden our base and win, not just for the power and the prestige of office, but for those issues and ideas that bind us together, first of all as Americans, second of all as Republicans. So I would like in 88 to take that Detroit/Dallas platform and update it. I'd like to change very little, but I would like to take that new beginning and broaden it, deepen it, expand it, export it, and I am very proud of having been one of the key architects, along with Clark and others, in drafting a platform that was pro-people, pro-worker, pro-family, pro-America, pro-life, pro-future, pro-population, pro-free enterprise, pro-urban enterprise zones to unleash the entrepreneurial talent that this country has in our inner cities to bring down radically high unemployment rates among our minorities. It was pro-savings, pro-investment, pro-tax reform, pro-peace through strength. The only thing that we didn't have in the 80 and 84 platform was something called the Strategic Defense Initiative. Now, we ought to take the Detroit and Dallas platform, put in the Strategic Defense Initiative, and I pledge to run on it, win on it, and implement it. No speech. That was it. I know it's going to be a shock. I know you want me to speak a lot longer. I'm just not going to do it. I refuse to do it. But I'd like to answer questions. So,
Jack, I had
Jim.
a chance to speak to you briefly when you came in. I know that 10 years ago you co-sponsored a resolution in Congress for national voter referendum so that people could vote on the issues nationally like we can in Michigan. Would you mind telling us what your position is today?
Jim, I believe in a national voter referendum. I advanced the idea at the conservative coalition, the CPAC convention in about 1982. The Conservative Political Action Community got together in Washington, co-sponsored by all of the conservative groups in the country, and I advanced the idea that the Republican Party wanted truly to be a populist party. We ought to allow the American people, as they do in Michigan, as they do in California, as I think 21 or 22 states, correct me if I'm wrong, allow for a process by which people can get certain issues on the ballot nationally. Now people say, hey, Kemp, that's really radical. Well, it's radically democratic. I hope the Republican Party is more democratic. Frankly, I think we are more democratic, small d, than the Democratic Party. That party's become an elitist party. It's become a party of special interests. And very frankly, if we show the American people, as Lincoln did in the beginning of the Republican Party, that we care about people, we trust them, we want to allow them to have the opportunity to get issues on the ballot. And of course, there are fail-safe mechanisms, so you don't put things on the ballot that are capricious. My wife always asks me, now what happens if somebody gets silly? And you don't have room for capriciousness, but on the great issues of referenda in America, that's the type of campaign I want to run. SDI, ask the American people, should we, as a country, be defended against any threat of an ICBM attack from either an adversary like the Soviet Union or a Gaddafi? Up or down? Do you think the American people would be with us or against us in finding the technology and implementing that technology? 1961, when John F. Kennedy asked the American people for a referendum on going to the moon, I was a Southern California, Goldwater Reagan conservative, playing quarterback for the San Diego Chargers, and I was inspired by the idea of taking this country into space and making us, or helping land a man on the moon by the end of the 60s. I like that idea. And I don't think there's anybody in this country that doesn't believe that we ought to use our technology to defend ourselves. If we told American people that we wanted a referendum on taxes, that we wanted a referendum on balancing the budget, we wanted a referendum on making the dollar honest and sound and stable and as good as gold again to bring interest rates down, putting enterprise zones in every single area of the United States of America where there's unemployment above the national average, supporting a strong defense, supporting a free trade zone from Canada right through Mexico into Latin America to advance exports for America and create more jobs. Let me ask you a question. And on the pro-family values, pro-family issues. I think the American people on the leading 10 or 12 issues of the day would vote with the men and women in this room. The problem is there are always politicians and political parties between their votes and seeing their dreams come true. If we can show them that we have nothing in mind other than making their dreams and hopes and aspirations come true, I am convinced that on the great issues of referendum and initiative for 1988, we would win. So I am a strong supporter, and I didn't mean to take so long on the answer, but that does excite me. That is a populist conservative idea. And that's why this conservative coalition must stick together. Yes, sir.
What is your attitude toward the Arias peace plan in Central America?
The Arias peace plan in Central America is a genuine desire by Central American democratic governments to bring peace to the area. It was authored, as you said, by Oscar Arias, the president of Costa Rica, Latin America's longest and most prestigious democracy. So from that standpoint, he is a genuine Democrat, small d, a very decent, able man, and his plan is awfully weak with regard to implementing the policy of bringing Ortega to accept the same democratic principles that he had pledged to acknowledge in his promise to the Organization of American States back in 1979. So I am, while supporting the hopes of getting Ortega to stop destabilizing his neighbors, to stop using his country as a base for Cuba, the Soviet Union, the PLO, Bulgaria, and East German troops, my belief is that until that day when they are thrown out and they totally neutralize Nicaragua and make it democratic, we should be strong supporters of the cause of the freedom fighters in Nicaragua, and I am pledged to making that commitment.
In rebuttal, in your regard, how do you feel about his statement about Reagan? You said that Reagan ought not to send more money to the country.
I disagree with Arias, and I've directed my staff today to send a letter to President Arias telling him that he should not interfere in the domestic policy of the United States Congress with regard to a vital strategic interest in Central America, which is the Panama Canal, the Eastern and Western Caribbean, the Eastern Pacific, and very frankly, I'm going to tell Mr. Arias that while I respect his right to speak his mind as a genuine leader in the move to democratize Nicaragua, that it ill behooves him to try to tell the Congress what to do about humanitarian or military assistance to the freedom fighters. Without that assistance, there is no plan, including the Arias plan, that will work. So he's going to get a strong letter from Jack Kemp as soon as the day is out.
What was your opinion of the budget summit meetings that happened in the wake of the stock market crash? Do you think that Bob Dole and others who like to raise taxes all the time are fixing to do that again?
I love those kind of questions. I don't know if you heard the Buckley debate from Houston, 3 or 4 weeks ago. I said that I favored no new deals with Jim Wright until he keeps his past deals with Ronald Reagan. Frankly, he has never kept his previous agreement on the budget. 1982, he pledged to raise taxes by $1 for every $3 of spending cuts. Let me put it the other way. He pledged to cut spending by $3 for every $1 of spending of tax increase. Did you understand what I just said? He pledged in 1982 to cut spending by $3 for every $1 of tax increase. We got a $1 tax increase, but we didn't get the spending cuts. So clearly, I think Jim Wright has a proposal, unfortunately agreed to by Bob Dole and Jim Baker and Howard Baker and probably Vice President Bush. If you listen to him in the debate with Tom Brokaw, when I asked him, would you do anything to defend the dollar? He said, no, I would do nothing to defend the dollar, irrespective of inflation going up or interest rates going up. He would not defend the dollar. Ladies and gentlemen, can you imagine a potential candidate in our party that tells the American people, in the face of the dollar's decline, in the face of a stock market decline, in the face of rising interest rates, in the face of a plummeting dollar, he would do nothing to defend it? That is what happened to Jimmy Carter in the 1970s. They talked down the dollar, and it caused not only high inflation, high mortgage rates, high prime rate, high interest rate for consumers. It also hurt the auto industry. It hurt farming. It hurt exports. It hurt this country, and notwithstanding that it caused unemployment to rise. So I think both Bob Dole and George Bush, unfortunately, do not understand the relationship with the stock market decline and the collapse of the dollar, or the fall of the dollar. What we need is a candidate in our party who understands why we should have a sound, stable dollar, who recognizes that we should not raise taxes. The budget deficit, ladies and gentlemen, is not the cause of the stock market collapse. Does anybody in this room think that the stock market in Singapore, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Taiwan, or Taipei, Bonn, Paris, and Rome, and London, and New York all fell on the same day to the same extent because leaders in the world woke up and realized that the United States had a budget deficit? I mean, that is absurd. What they woke up to find was that Congress was raising taxes, that the liberals were protectionists, and that the United States Federal Reserve Board was raising interest rates, as was the Bundesbank and the Bank of Japan. And that's bad news for investors. That's bad news for investors, probably good news for bonds. Stocks fell, bonds rallied. Ladies and gentlemen, we must not repeat the mistakes of 29 and 30. We ought not to raise taxes. We ought to cut the capital gains tax in half right now, down to 15. That'll get more revenue. We ought to stabilize the dollar, bring interest rates down. We ought to make a massive commitment to lower unemployment to 4% by 1989, not only among the national population, but we ought to do it in the minority population of America. Every 1%, listen to this, a 1% drop in unemployment in the United States of America reduces the deficit by more than the whole deficit reduction package signed onto by Bob Dole and Jim Wright. Ladies and gentlemen, the most compassionate, the most positive, the most constructive, the only long and short run way to really balance the budget and the books of the United States government is to make this economy perform at high levels of employment, low rates of interest, low tax rates, sound fiscal policy to be sure, and let's give the president a line item veto. That's what he needs, not a tax increase. You want me to get out of here? Just a couple more seconds. I told Godola this is my microphone. He paid for it, but I've liberated. I'll be shorter. Yes, sir.
What must the United States do in the next few years with regards to the country of Chile to avoid a communist revolution and another communist government that hates us?
Where governments are communist, we should support genuine freedom fighters who want to overthrow Marxist-Leninist governments to tell the world that we do not accept the Brezhnev Doctrine. Where governments are authoritarian, in the context that Jean Kirkpatrick wrote her great book, we should press for change, reform, build up democratic institutions, and from South Africa to Chile to Korea to the Philippines to governments around the world that are authoritarian, with which we disagree on human rights and with which we disagree on lack of democratic rights, we should do everything we can to build up the forces of democracy as we did in El Salvador. El Salvador today has moved from a right-wing authoritarian government to a much more centrist democratic government. I don't agree with some of the collectivist policies of the Duarte regime. He's a genuine Democrat. And my hope is that we can now convince him that he's established political democracy, that capitalism and democracy go hand in hand, and if he really wants to unleash the talent of El Salvador and the potential of El Salvador, he should remove the fetters from the free enterprise system of El Salvador. But we want Chile to democratize. We want Korea to democratize. We want to help friendly governments move towards democracy. We want to build up institutions. We want free labor unions. We want free labor. We want free capital. We want private property. But we should not, in my view, arm the ANC. We should not arm movements that are in league with the Communist Internationale. Yes, sir.
In connection with what you said a moment ago regarding the economy and all of that, you sounded a great deal like Ronald Reagan in 1980. And in my opinion, because of the financial markets, the world, and so forth, is the lack of confidence in leadership in the Congress and the White House. What's your feeling on that one?
I think you and I are probably singing the same tune. I said earlier that I thought the lack of confidence in the idea that was being propounded by the Secretary of Treasury, that there was no floor to the dollar, the protectionist mood of the Congress, the tax increase that is not in and of itself enough to destroy the American economy. Jim Wright's $12 billion tax increase is not enough to destroy the economy. But ladies and gentlemen, throwing a little sand into moving parts can slow it down and grind it to a halt. And that tax bill that he wanted to pass was anti-capital formation, it was anti-business, anti-growth, and it really did cause havoc in the financial markets.
Don't you think that adding to that problem is the lack of strength of leadership coming out of the White House?
Well, I must say I've been disappointed in Howard Baker, and Jim Baker making an accommodation with the liberal wing of the Democratic Party in the Congress that sunk Bork, that tried to tie the president's hands at the summit, that wants to kill SDI. Very frankly, ladies and gentlemen, there are things upon which you can compromise, and there are some things upon which we should not compromise. We should not compromise on strategic defense. It's not a negotiable item, and we need to build it. And frankly, I would not compromise with the Democrats on a tax increase. Look, for 50 years, they spent money, they redistributed wealth, they financed it with deficits, and we were the tax collectors for their spending programs. Every now and then we'd win the White House. We never won the Congress. Now and then we'd win the White House when people got fed up and there was some problem. We never won it for the type of reasons that Lincoln won in 1860. Now, having said that, being a tax collector for liberal spending programs is not my idea of a Republican Party. What I'd like to see the Republican Party is take to the American people on a national referendum basis in 1988. Even if we can't get a formal national referendum, I plan to make it a part of a metaphysical referendum, a political referendum. I plan to offer the American people a true choice. The choice would be this. Ladies and gentlemen, auto workers in Detroit, black folks in Buffalo or South Bronx, working men and women in Michigan or Iowa or New Hampshire or the South, farmers in the Midwest, if you're undertaxed, if you feel you're not paying enough tax, do not vote Republican. Do not vote for Kemp. I'm willing to throw away my career, if necessary, to prevent a tax increase on the American people. If you're undertaxed, vote for Dukakis or Gebhardt or Babbitt or Jesse Jackson. They'll be pleased to accommodate you. Give them a choice. Give them a choice. Ladies and gentlemen of America, if you think the dollar should sink, if you want to try to manipulate currency, if you want to weaken the United States dollar, if you want to reignite inflation, don't vote for Kemp. Ladies and gentlemen of America, if you think the best defense of America is no defense of America, don't vote for Kemp. Vote Democrat. They'll kill SDI. They will. They are going to kill SDI. If you think America should be defended, we want you to have a place to go. Those types of questions I've been asking folks in Buffalo for 18 years. By and large, my victories have averaged between 75 and 80%. My district is not a Southern California country club, blue, white-collar, silk stocking district. It is a Eastern and Central European ethnic Catholic, Jewish, evangelical, democratic district. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm convinced that America and our party needs to have that type of a referendum. And on those issues, I think we can win and reestablish the platform that we can take as a mandate. If we win 49 out of 50 states in 1988, that we then take our platform to Jim Wright and we say, look, this is what the American people want. Now, wouldn't that be a lot of fun to run a campaign that way? Yeah.
Jack, it appears that a lot of President Reagan's problem is the liberals that he allowed to stay in executive positions who are willing to compromise with the Democrats. If you're elected president, what will you do about those long-established liberals that are in the executive?
I'm not hesitating over my answer. I'm hesitating over the abuse of the word liberal, not by you, but by the liberals. I love words so much. I want to just recall for the moment that liberal means freedom, generosity, openness, in the classical sense of the use of the word. Liberal comes from the Latin to be free. And that is something we should not allow to be captured by the left. They are not, I think, we should not allow them to capture words. Compassion. Compassion. You know, they create an economic desert, give you a glass of water, and call it compassion. Compassion is not measured by how many people need welfare. True compassion, in a Judeo-Christian sense, is measured by how few people need public charity. The most compassionate society is a growing, abundant, prosperous, opportunistic nation in which all men and all women have equal opportunity to be what God meant them to be. So only in the sense that the liberals in the White House are not really liberals, they're kind of mugwumps. You know what a mugwump is? That's a guy who sits on the fence with his mug on one side and his wump on the other. That's not original. I don't know who said it, but wherever he is. And here's my pledge, and I know a lot more questions. I want to get out and shake some hands, but here's my pledge to you. Here's my pledge to you. And just consider that I'm trying to look everybody in the eye when I say it, and I know I'm on TV, and there's a lot of good reporters back there, and they're going to capture this pledge. There's no perfect candidate. We've got to have a candidate in '88. We need somebody. We need somebody who has a demonstrable record of proven credibility in pursuing the intellectual revolution and political revolution that we like to call that Reagan new beginning that started in Detroit in 1980. We need somebody who understands the strengths, but who also understands that there have been some flaws, and that mending the flaws and building on the strengths need to be moved forward. We need somebody who's not willing to look back and play the status quo game, but somebody who understands that the future can be one of unlimited opportunity if we make the right choices and pursue the right policies and bring the right people into government. And we need somebody who is committed to the ideas, who understands the ideas, who can explain them not just to some, but to all. I want you to know I'm going to make two pledges right now. Number one, I will campaign in every single neighborhood of the United States of America that I can possibly, humanly, physically get to. And I don't mean it in the sense of trying to reach every neighborhood physically, but at least whether it's black or Hispanic or Asian, whether it's evangelical Christian or Catholic or Jewish, whether it is senior citizen center halls or college campuses, whether it is the factories of Detroit and Buffalo, New York, or the farms of Iowa and Minnesota, or the hardworking families of the Sun Belt, I want you to know that I would be a candidate that would challenge the liberal left, and I'm using that word now more in the pejorative, less in the classical sense of the word. I would challenge the Democratic Party's strength. I would campaign in the District of Columbia. I'd campaign in Harlem, inner city of Detroit. I would campaign in every single area where there's anybody who's willing to stop and listen to a message of hope, growth, opportunity, and a chance for children and families to be what God meant them to be. And I'll tell you this, my second pledge is this. I would appoint men and women to my cabinet and to my staff that will pursue the policies of progressive conservatism to which we outlined in Detroit and Dallas in 80 and 84, and which we, I believe, will outline in our platform in 88 in New Orleans. And we will broaden the base by showing people that our principles, policies, ideas, and platform want to bring this country to that status that we all pray for. One nation, under God, with liberty, justice, and equal opportunity for everyone, and the commitment that we're going to move America ahead, but we're not going to leave anybody in the world behind. We're not going to leave the third world behind. We're not going to leave people behind. We're going to try to be what our country was meant to be in the beginning, like the Good Shepherd. And I pledge to you that is the type of cabinet, staff, and we'll have men and women in this cabinet and in this staff and policy.